Good morning, everybody. Now, Mr. Gill.
Good morning, my lord. Today we have two witnesses. These are the first witnesses from the Scottish COVID Bereaved group. The first witness is Caroleanne Stewart.
Thank you.
The statement reference is SCI WT 0871 and then 5 zeros 1.
Now, good morning, Ms. Stewart. Please take a seat, make yourself comfortable. You'll be asked some questions by Mr. Gill. Now, Mr. Gill, when you're ready.
Thank you, my lord. Good morning, Ms. Stewart.
Morning.
Your full name is Caroleanne Stewart, I think, is that right?
Yes.
Your details are known to the inquiry,
Yeah.
so your date of birth and your contact address. We've given the reference to your statement. Can I confirm that the statement that you've given to the inquiry, together with what you will say today, is the evidence that you wish to provide the inquiry with?
Yes.
Now, we do have in force a general restriction order, which I think I explained to you
Yes.
the other day when we met. And so can you please try not to mention the names of anybody, including the people about whom you're talking. So can you refer to, you're going to be referring to your brother, you're going to be referring to your fiancé. Can you just call them in that way, your brother and your fiancé?
Okay.
If you would do that, please. If you do make a slip and you mention a name, don't worry, but we will have to stop if you do that in order that the tech guys next door can attend to it. But it's not a problem, but we will have to stop the proceedings very briefly. You're here to tell us about the death of your brother, is that right?
Yes.
We know that he sadly died on the 1st of May 2020 in Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow. Is that
Yes.
right? And I think he was 57.
Yes.
You're also going to tell us about the death of your fiancé, and he died on the 3rd of September 2020.
Yes.
And I think he was 46, is that
Yes.
right? Can we talk, first of all, about your brother? As we are talking, your statement and various paragraphs of your statement will appear on the screen in front of you.
Okay.
So we will look at that as we are progressing. Your brother was, I think, a family man.
Yes.
He left a wife, a daughter, and 2 grandchildren. Is that right?
Yes.
And I think you tell us he was the best friend of his own brother.
Yes.
He enjoyed darts, snooker, and he was a taxi driver.
Yes.
And I think he lived just around the corner from where you lived.
He did.
You tell us that as a taxi driver and having regard to the I wonder, could we have a moment when I just can you just check? I'm sorry, my lord. Let me just.
will be in a minute. Now, Miss Stewart, take your seat again. Sorry about the delay. Good. Now, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, my lord. Ms. Stewart, one of the things that we were doing in the interim period there is that we were disapplying the restriction order so that, I think it's hopefully been explained to you, you can name your brother and your fiancé. So we know their names respectively are Derek and Craig. You can name them, but please don't name anybody else.
Okay.
So it is just Derek and Craig that you can name. So that makes life a little bit easier, a little bit more natural. So we were dealing with Derek
Yes.
to begin with, your brother, and I think we'd taken from you that he was a taxi driver. I think I was intending to go on to ask about the way in which he approached his work. I think you say in paragraph 8 of your statement that he was extremely cautious, and I think we need to put a date on this. These are the very early days of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And you explain that he would clean his taxi, had a tub of sanitizer where he would put his coins. So he took matters very seriously.
Even pre-COVID, he was very, very particular about his taxi, even just pre-COVID.
Right. And he was also interested in the news, particularly the news about COVID.
Yeah.
And I think you say he used to record the news.
He used to record that in case he missed anything.
Yeah. Yeah. You tell us in paragraph 9 that prior to him becoming unwell, Derek had a hire in his taxi, and you say it was round about the 26th of March 2020. Yes. And this fare, the person who was in the taxi was coughing and spluttering, and you say that Derek stopped and put him out.
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously, this is something you've been told.
By Derek.
By Derek, yeah, yeah. And you say that Derek wasn't taking any chances.
That's correct.
And also that Derek thought this is when and how he must have caught COVID.
Yes.
Yeah. He also said, as you say in paragraph 10, that, and you quote him as saying, "I'm finished with this, I can't handle that."
He did.
What did you understand? Well, first of all, did he say that to you, or was that to somebody else? And what do you understand he meant by that?
He just meant that he was stopped working because it wasn't safe to work anymore. Okay. And this man that was coughing and spluttering in his taxi just made him decide that was it. He wasn't taking any chances.
Okay. Yeah. And we know from your statement that very shortly after that, he became unwell.
Yes.
And the majority of the information that you give us after that, I think, is information that you obtained from talking either to Derek himself or to Derek's wife.
Yes.
You talk about him being unwell for a number of days in the house. This is in paragraph 12.
Yes.
And that he was, as you put it in your statement, feeling terrible and a bit breathless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gradually, he was getting worse.
Yeah. And I think arrangement was made that he would go to the COVID hub in Mary Hill to be tested. Is that right?
Yes. He phoned his GP that morning to tell his GP that he was feeling basically really unwell, and he was finding it hard to breathe. And it was a GP that said we would send you out transport to take him to the hub, the COVID hub, to be tested.
And I think the arrangement was that there would be a patient transport van
Yes.
which would be sent for him.
Yes.
Yeah. But he started to deteriorate
Yes.
in the period waiting for the van, as I understand it.
Well, his wife wasn't aware at the time that Derek had phoned his GP.
Yeah.
He was doing it from up in his bedroom.
Right. Yeah. But she then became aware of him, and as you describe this in paragraph 13, that she saw Derek coming down the stairs, banging off the walls, breathless. He could hardly breathe, and his lips were all blue, purpley colour.
Yes.
And I think a decision was taken by Derek's wife that an ambulance should be summoned.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think you tell us that Derek's wife is in the medical profession. I think
Yes.
she's a nurse. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The van did arrive for him, and again, you're repeating what you've been told. And a short time later, an ambulance arrived for him. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And by that time, as you've been told, Derek was struggling. He was in the driveway. He was clutching his chest, and he slumped over the driveway gates.
Yes.
And I think some of your neighbours thought he was having a heart attack.
Yes.
Or some of their neighbours thought he was having a heart attack. And I think Derek's wife shouted at the ambulance paramedics.
Correct.
And, well, you tell us what obviously she reported that she shouted, and presumably she told you what state she was in when she was doing this.
Screaming. She was screaming.
Yeah, okay. And you say that she said, he needs help, he needs help, he needs to get oxygen.
Yes.
Yeah. But they didn't, as I understand it, get out of their ambulance.
No.
And she went up towards the ambulance, and as you say, they put up their hands and gestured to her to stop and not come any nearer.
Correct.
Were they, so far as you're aware of the fact that there was a transport van in the area at the time?
They were.
Yeah, okay. And in fact, as you say in paragraph 18, they shouted, "Stop, don't come near, there's a transport van here." So they were conscious of that. And apparently they just drove away in the ambulance, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. They didn't get out of the ambulance, they didn't afford him any help.
No.
The transport van, as you put it in paragraph 19, it was a white van and the driver was just that, a driver. He didn't have any medical equipment with him, nor did he have any medical qualifications, apparently.
No. It wasn't one of the patient transport vans that people think it was. It was just a white van.
Okay. And again, we understand from what you're telling us is that Derek was still hanging over the gate, gasping for air and struggling to breathe.
Yes.
just taking matters short, the transport van and its driver did take Derek to the Maryhill hub, I think, is that right?
Yes.
There was a doctor and nurse there waiting for him, and they examined him in the van, I understand.
Yes.
And the decision was taken that his condition was sufficiently serious that they wouldn't take him into the hub, but he was effectively, an ambulance was arranged and he was taken to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
There was other patients waiting at the hub, obviously clearly sick as well, but Derek, the first ambulance arrived because he was so poorly. He got the first one, he went in front of everybody else.
Right. 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 In paragraph 23 of your statement, you say that when he arrived at the hospital in the acute receiving ward, he crashed. And I think we understand what you mean by that. As you put it, his condition had seriously deteriorated, and effectively he was having a heart attack.
No, he wasn't having a heart attack. He was in respiratory failure, and his heart was in a lot of distress.
Right.
If they hadn't worked quickly and efficiently, it could have resulted in cardiac arrest.
Right. And I think subsequently, well, there may have been some concern as to the accuracy of what Derek had been saying. You subsequently realized that that was what was happening to him, that a number of medical professionals were working on him.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, he was transferred to the high dependency unit, where he was given oxygen therapy and intravenous antibiotics. He was also put on dexamethasone and morphine.
Yes.
Yeah. And the initial indications were that he appeared to be doing okay and was picking up.
Yes.
But you also tell us in paragraph 24 that he was hallucinating.
Yes.
Were you there at any time during this? Or
No, we weren't allowed in to visit. No visiting.
Right. So how were you aware, or how were other members of your family aware that he was hallucinating?
Well, he was still phoning. He was still on the phone speaking to people. Yes, he was hallucinating. He was distressed. He was disorientated. He was seeing things. We thought he was hallucinating because he told us he was seeing these things. These people were all round about him, and I can see everybody round about me, and they were working on me. At this particular time, we knew nothing about this. So we assumed that it was the medication. We spoke to the staff about it on the phone, and they said it was the medication that was making him do this. So at that point, we did think he was majorly hallucinating, because he was telling us the people all round about him, they were working on him, they were pushing his chest, they were doing this, and we were thinking, no, they're not. Do you know what I mean? Because he was obviously still wakened. That's what we thought, he was hallucinating. But he was very distressed and disorientated. And we did assume he was hallucinating by saying these things. He's seen people all over him, round about him, working on him. But at that point, none of the family knew at this point he'd actually crashed in the acute receiving unit.
As you say in paragraph 26, he was well enough to phone the family.
Yes.
You and your family members, were you able to contact the high dependency unit in which he was located?
We tried a lot and nobody answered the phone. Wasn't for the want of trying.
Yeah.
Nobody answered the phone.
Did you get through at all to the unit?
Yes.
Yeah. And when you did get through to the unit, did you get much information from the
No.
unit?
No. Very, very little communication.
Now, were you personally trying to get through to the unit, or was it Derek's wife and his family?
Our whole family.
Right.
We're trying to get through to the high dependency.
I think you tell us in paragraph 28 that Derek FaceTimed you from the unit. He still had his clothes on, and he wasn't in a hospital gown.
That's correct.
And you took some screenshots for the purpose of showing to your mum
Yes.
to establish that Derek was in hospital and that he was talking, as you put it.
Yeah.
And your mum was at that time 83.
Yes.
Yeah. What was her reaction to all that?
What, to the photograph?
No, what was her reaction to what was going on with her son having to go into hospital?
Her son's lying in the hospital and she can't go and visit him. She's an 83, it's her son, she's his mother. And she wasn't allowed to go and visit him. She was 83, she wasn't really clued up to go on phones and on iPads and do FaceTime, and she wasn't that knowledged to do that. So she had to obviously rely on us telling her things, hence the reason why when Derek FaceTimed me, I screenshotted him on the FaceTime so that I could show my mum that he was sitting up, he did have his clothes on to make her feel that he's okay, as we thought.
You do say, however, that it was destroying to watch because he was talking nonsense.
Yes.
And I think you also say that he was appeared very agitated and distressed.
Yes.
So far as being tested for COVID, there was, as you say in paragraph 31, there was a first COVID test on arrival at the hospital, which was negative.
Yes.
But the second test, which was done 3 days later, was positive.
Yes.
And again, was it Derek who let you know that, or was it the hospital?
The hospital.
Okay,
Let his wife know that.
right. So, and you posed the question in paragraph 31 as a question as to whether or not Derek had COVID when he was admitted, or did he get it when he was in hospital?
That's something we don't know.
Now, progressing on a little bit, you refer at paragraph 32 to a date, the 11th of April,
Yes.
and there was communications between Derek and his wife
Yes.
when it's said that Derek was quite aggressive. I take it that wasn't Derek's normal
No.
approach to his wife.
No, that wasn't his nature at all.
Yeah. we were talking about Derek's distress and agitation and his aggressive behaviour, which was out of character for him.
Yeah.
You say at paragraph 33 that the medical staff made an assumption that it was his medications that had made him worse and that was causing this,
That's correct.
these conditions that he was manifesting. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And his wife, however, got a phone call just before midnight on that night from a consultant at the ITU saying that Derek had been transferred into ITU, intensive care therapy unit, had been ventilated and was on maximum life support. Now, that was obviously, presumably, something that his wife then communicated to you as well.
Yes.
And obviously that, on the basis of what you've been telling us, that represented a very serious and sudden deterioration in his condition.
Yes.
Yeah.
They withdrew his medication.
Yeah. So they'd withdrawn his medication.
Yes.
And after that, there was a deterioration in his condition. Is that right?
Rapid deterioration in his condition.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you pose a number of questions as to how that deterioration had happened and how it could have happened so quickly. That during that period, the consultant, you say at paragraph 39, would phone your sister-in-law every day with updates. Is
Yes.
that right? And you say it was like a lifeline at that time.
Yeah, one call a day. Uh-huh.
And what information were you being given in those calls? Or
Practically nothing. He's just stable, he's just the same, no change, just stable, just the same, no change.
And you did, as you say in paragraph 42, start asking questions. And you then started phoning personally, as I understand it, late at night. I think they christened you the midnight caller.
I was called a midnight caller.
Yeah. And that was by a particular nurse, and again, please don't name
Yes,
her, but
a male nurse.
A male nurse.
A male nurse.
Yeah. Well, a nurse. And you say he was so nice and compassionate.
He was.
Yeah. And at that time, you were being told that Derek was doing well.
He was.
That the ventilator was being switched down daily over the next week or so as matters progressed. And he was starting to take breaths of his own and, as you put it, doing really well. This is what you were being told.
Yes.
I take it you, during this time, none of your family were able to go and see him?
No.
Were you able, were you able, or was he in any condition to actually communicate with you?
In intensive care?
Yeah. Could he?
No, he was unconscious.
Right. Right. Now, the midnight caller nurse came back after some period that he'd been off. And he had a conversation with you, and you refer to that at the bottom of paragraph 43. Could you just tell us what he said?
The bottom of it?
Yes, at the bottom of paragraph 43, the last sentence.
I'm not going to say he's looking amazing, Caroleanne, but I'm shocked at the progress he's made.
And that obviously was optimistic so far as you and your family were concerned. And at paragraph 44, you said, we honestly thought that he was coming home because he was improving so well and his ventilator had been turned down.
We were even ordering balloons off Amazon, making arrangements to be out the bottom of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital for him coming home. Putting balloons around his driveway gates. Obviously, we were going to wait at the gates, the bottom of the Queen Elizabeth. But we were all talking amongst the family, that's what we were going to do. That's how confident we thought he was coming home.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Subsequently, there was the possibility of a tracheotomy was mentioned.
Oh, yes.
And you refer to that at paragraph 45. How did you become aware of that possibility?
The ITU consultant had discussed it with his wife. Mm-hmm. That he was doing okay, well enough, they thought, to do a tracheostomy, even though basically he would only been doing breaths on his own for maybe like a day and a half.
Okay. However, that unfortunately failed.
Immediately failed.
Yes. And he was immediately reventilated and put again on full life support.
Yeah.
And again, you have questions as to how that happened.
Yes.
Now, Derek's daughter received a phone call, I think, at 6:25 in the morning on the 1st of May with the terrible news that Derek was not going to make it. Mm-hmm. And that his organs had failed and that they were going to switch off his ventilator.
Yes.
And you would presumably have been immediately made aware of that situation.
Sorry?
You would have been immediately made aware of that situation.
Yes, my niece phoned.
Yeah. And you phoned the unit at 7:45 that morning and asked how he was, and you were told that he'd passed away at 7:20 in the morning. And you make the obvious comment that nobody had told you, and clearly that would have been devastating news for the entire family.
Well, if you get a phone call at 6:25 in the morning to be told that your dad, basically his organs have failed, his ventilator's no longer supporting him, and they were going to need to switch off his life support machine, but they had to wait for a second doctor to come to agree, because it's got to be two doctors that agree for a life support machine to be switched off, and you don't hear nothing back from a hospital. From that moment at 6:25, we were all staying off the phone because we didn't want to phone my niece, didn't want to phone my brother. We all stayed off the phone waiting on a phone call from ITU that never came. So I had to phone myself to find out and ask how my brother was. Well, I knew how he was, obviously he was bad, but, and that's when I was told that he'd passed away at 7:20 that morning.
Thank you, Lord. Right. You tell us, Ms. Stewart, about bereavement in paragraphs 51 and following of your statement, and obviously we can read that, and we don't want to go through it in detail with you because I realise it must be very upsetting for you. But the funeral arrangements were that I think that there could be 12 people at the funeral. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And you weren't able to clothe your brother in the clothes that you would have wanted him to be in for his cremation. Right?
No.
And I think there was a question of personalising a blanket that could have been made available to him in his coffin, and that wasn't possible either.
No, my niece had ordered a blanket when he died, the day Derek died. My niece had ordered this blanket, a personalised blanket with grandkids' names on it, to wrap him up in case he get cold. And she was told no, it wasn't allowed.
The coffin, I think, was sealed. It was not allowed to be opened, and you wouldn't be able to see your brother.
No.
You, in fact, couldn't touch the coffin in the funeral parlour. I think you wanted to touch it, but that wasn't possible, was it?
No. Not even put your hand on it to say goodbye. Wasn't allowed.
Yeah. You did manage, however, to insist on walking behind the coffin.
Yeah.
And you also did manage to insist on a piper.
Yeah, we were told no. It wasn't allowed either. And it was actually my niece that insisted that we were walking behind our dad and we would walk 2 metres apart. Because they only stayed about 5 minutes from the crematorium. So there was absolutely no point in getting the big black cars. So, and it was more personal to walk behind Eric. They said no at the beginning. And my niece said, well, we're doing it. We will stay 2 metres apart, we're outside. And if it's the last thing we can do for my dad, we're doing it. So that's what they done. And then I asked if I could get a piper, and I were told no, no piper. When I asked the reason why, I never got a reason why. We were just saying there was no piper. And I said, well, there will be a piper. And we got a piper, and he walked 2 metres in front of the coffin, the hearse.
Okay. Just two other points in relation to the funeral. Your 83-year-old mother obviously was at the funeral, and you make the point, and I think everybody can appreciate that at the end she was as you put it in paragraph 64, a wee 83-year-old frail woman who had just cremated her son and couldn't get a hug or anything.
Yeah.
The other thing that you observe in relation to the funeral was what you call the old metal trolley and the noise of it.
Yeah. Okay. Rattle-tattle metal trolley. The oldest thing you've ever seen in your life coming down, my brother getting wheeled down on it.
Yeah. And unfortunately that made a reappearance later.
It did.
Yeah. You made a complaint to the Scottish Ambulance Service, which you refer to in paragraph 65 and following. And that was something that you made very quickly after your brother's death, as I understand it.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Because a paramedic's job is supposed to come out in an ambulance and assess a patient and decide whether they need urgent medical intervention or not, and act on it. They do not sit in an ambulance, watch a man hanging over a driveway gate to die, and then drive away and leave him. So yes, I did phone up to ask a question.
And you were informed that there would be an investigation?
Yes.
There was an investigation?
Yes.
And the two paramedics who were involved were suspended during the course of that investigation.
Suspended immediately.
Yeah. And in August 2020, you got a letter from the ambulance service
yes.
in relation to the investigation. And as you tell us about this in paragraph 68, where you say that the paramedics had admitted that they failed in their duty of care.
Yes.
And they explained it or admitted it that they had panicked and didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
and as a consequence of that, they had to undergo a retraining program before they were allowed back out on the road again.
Correct.
And you posed the question as to whether or not, had Derek been taken to hospital in an ambulance at an earlier stage, or whether he could have been saved. And you posed that question. You express your opinion, and indeed you've already done that, but just for the record, it's paragraphs 70 and 71. You express that your opinion on and your feelings about what happened. Now, can I ask Ms. Stewart that the letter that you received, do you still have it?
No, that went to my niece.
Right. Is it possible that that letter can be obtained and made available to the inquiry team? It can probably be asked of your legal representatives, but if it can be, we'd be grateful to see that letter, and we will arrange to have it copied and to return to you.
Yes.
Okay. Lord, maybe take a few minutes. It's 11 o'clock.
10 past?
Yes.
Very good. 10 past then. Excuse me. Right. Yes, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, my lord. Ms. Stewart, we're going to go on to talk about your fiancé, Craig. And you tell us at paragraph 72 that he did not die of COVID, but his consultant told you that he died as a result of COVID.
Yes.
And he was 46, and he died following a brain aneurysm.
Yes.
And I think you indicate that he had had at least one previous brain aneurysm earlier in his life.
Two.
Okay.
2 brain aneurysms.
Okay. 3 weeks before he died, he started complaining that he couldn't read the text messages that you were sending him. Is that right?
Yeah, I was texting him and I never ever got a reply back, which was quite unusual for Craig. And he kept, when he came home, I'd say, why did you not answer my text? And he said, I heard the ping, but I couldn't read it. I couldn't read the text. And this went on for days. And then I was texting him again, no reply, and then he would send me a random text. So once again I said, why are you not answering my text? He went, I can't read it. I can hear it, I've got a text, but when I'm going to read it, I can't really see it.
Yeah. And I think you also noticed that his face was a bit swollen.
Came home from work one day and one side of his face was swollen and his eye was kind of drooping down a wee bit. And I said to him, your face is swollen. He said, is it? I said, mm-hmm. He said, maybe it's just a wee abscess I've got coming. And he was doing this to his face, but he says, my face isn't sore. So I took photographs to show him the swelling on his face, and he still insisted it might just have been a wee abscess.
I think he then wondered whether he might need glasses.
He mentioned that as well,
And you Googled his complaints, and you found out that it could be a sign of bleeding on the brain. You mentioned that in paragraph 77.
Yes.
Yeah. So you phoned an optician and spoke to a receptionist at the opticians.
I did.
And you tell us about that at paragraph 78. And you gave the receptionist a background to Craig's condition and some of his relevant medical history.
Told the receptionist everything about his medical history. Told him he had previous brain aneurysms. He also had another 2 brain episodes in between the 2 aneurysms. It's sudden vision loss that went on to double vision, and then went back to obviously just normal single vision again. First thing she said was, has he got a headache?
Yeah.
And I said, no. Okay, he never had a headache.
Yeah.
And I was told immediately right away, well, it's not an emergency, and put the phone down.
Right. It's probably obvious from the way you've described that, but do I take it from what you are saying that the receptionist did not check with anybody, such as an optician, as to what the symptoms that you were describing might have indicated?
No, the receptionist triaged a patient presenting with serious problems. A receptionist, it's their job is to answer a phone or take appointments, not to triage an emergency.
And you express that concern at paragraph 80, and we can read that as well as what you've said. Craig did go off to work, and on the 1st of September, you, in the course of the day, got a call to say he'd collapsed at work.
Yes.
And he was then taken to hospital, to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary. Right.
Yes, he collapsed in Edinburgh Airport.
Okay. And you received a call from a consultant at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary saying that he was very confused and very critical, I think is the way you put it.
No, I got a call asking me if I'd known about Craig having any previous bleeds to the brain.
Yeah.
And I said yes. Why? And he said, well, we think maybe that's what he's suffering from just now.
Yeah. Well, you say at paragraph 85 that you asked if he was okay, and they said he's very confused and very critical. That presumably was what whoever you were speaking to at the...
It was the consultant in the acute resus in the A&E department.
Now, your brother, I think, took you to hospital, but in the course of that journey to hospital in Edinburgh, you got a call to be told that Craig was now had another bleed on the brain, had a stroke, was now unconscious on a ventilator.
Yes.
Regrettably, nothing could be done for him, as you tell us in paragraph 90. He remained in ICU, and you were eventually told that there was no brain activity and that he was brain dead.
Yeah.
Right. His ventilator was switched off on the 3rd of September at 10 a.m. You weren't allowed to be there when the ventilator was switched off.
No.
But you were allowed to go in immediately afterwards, is that right?
Yes.
And I think you've explained what the consultant told you at paragraph 99 of your statement. Perhaps you would just read that out for us, please.
The consultant explained that because of previous surgery that he had a gap in his brain, the blood therefore had a space to go and did not build up, causing headaches like his first aneurysm did. The consultant told me that COVID did not kill Craig, but resulted in his death. Had he been able to assess an optician and have an examination that he normally would have done pre-COVID, he could have been saved. He would have had another operation and he would still be living today.
You talk about bereavement again, because this was only a few months after you'd lost your brother.
5 months.
And the arrangements were somewhat different this time. You were allowed to see Craig's body. You were allowed, as you put it, to say goodbyes, and your wee granddaughter was allowed to put a teddy in beside him. And these would be all obviously important things for you at this stage. You were allowed to have 15 people at his funeral, although restrictions were still in place, and You, however, weren't allowed to carry his coffin. And you couldn't quite understand why that was the case when he hadn't died of COVID.
I was in an ITU in Edinburgh Royal. I was able to walk all round about the ITU, in and out, down the stairs to go on my phone, back up the stairs. I was allowed to walk willy-nilly in an ITU department full of COVID patients lying on ventilators. I was allowed to be with Craig in the room. I was allowed to be with him in the funeral parlour. We were allowed to see him. We were allowed to touch him. We were allowed to kiss him. We were allowed to do that. But when I asked if his brothers could carry his coffin, I was told no.
Were you given a reason for that?
No. Restrictions.
Mm-hmm. You were just told there were restrictions?
Yeah.
Okay. Just one matter, well, sorry, there's one other matter. You do mention the noise of the rattling trolley. Again, this is something that...
Same trolley my brother was on, same funeral directors my brother was in, same room my brother's coffin was in, the same crematorium my brother was in, the same metal trolley my brother was on.
Okay. One matter you do talk about is encountering an elderly couple outside the ICU who was sitting there. And you tell us about this at paragraphs 93 and 94 of your statement. Don't you just give us an indication of what you spoke to them about and what they said to you and what happened? When
Craig got put into ITU, when he took for resus up to ITU, I had to, obviously the Craig's trolley went one way and I had to go the other way and look for the ITU. And when I got there was a wee man and woman sitting outside, wee elderly, frail couple sitting outside the ITU department. And I never thought anything else of it, they were just sitting there. So the nurse came and got me, obviously in full PPE, took me up to where Craig was in a side room. And obviously I stayed with Craig. And then my daughter was on her way up to sit with me. And I was going down to meet her because she couldn't find the ITU. So I was going down to meet her. So I went away down to meet her and then I come back up again. She went in and then I spoke to the wee woman and says, "Dear, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Uh-huh." She says, "How are you allowed in there and I'm not?" I says, "Because my fiance's in a wee room of his own and he's at the end of life." And she says, "Well, my son's in there and he's got COVID and he's on a ventilator. Could you go and see if you can find him and tell him I love him and his mum and dad's outside?" And I said, "I'll try my best." And I walked down and I seen the guy's name on the wall. And the nurse looked at me as if to say, "What are you doing standing here?" She had on a big mask. I said, "His mum and dad's outside and they've asked me to tell me that they love him." And I can relate to that because my brother was that person as well, lying in an ITU. So I told the guy that his mum and dad were outside and I loved him. And that made the world to me and to these people sitting outside. Now, how were they allowed to sit outside an ITU when I wasn't allowed to get anywhere near the grounds of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital when my brother was lying in ITU on a ventilator? What's the difference of two Scottish hospitals with two different they were actually sitting, they'd been there for 3 days. This wee man and woman had been sitting there for 3 days. They weren't allowed in, but they weren't told to get out. We couldn't even get in the grounds of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. It was big yellow jackets everywhere. No way could you get near the grounds to ever yellow in a door, or let alone sit outside an ITU. So the same Scottish Government making the rules. So I could walk willy-nilly through the ITU when Craig was there with one mask on, just a mask. Craig's sister was able to travel from Leeds with his niece up to Edinburgh Royal and walked straight right through Edinburgh Royal right into the ITU, no questions asked, nothing. Put a mask on and you're okay to go. Okay, restrictions were a wee bit maybe laxed down at that time, but the Edinburgh Royal was full of COVID. Everywhere was still full of COVID. We were still in restrictions. So I can make the comparison of two different hospitals, two Scottish hospitals with two ITU departments, and the difference was unbelievable.
You make this point, you made it very forcefully, Ms. Stewart, and you make it also in paragraph 106 of your statement. We have it there. The impact on you of these events you set out in paragraphs 103 and following. You say that the impact for me and my family has been one of devastation. We need answers as to why our loved ones died horrific deaths. You feel hurt and guilty that Derek died alone, even though he would have fought Goliath. We would have fought Goliath to be with him as he passed away. And you say that our family chain was broken. Can you just indicate how you feel that? How is your family chain broken?
Well, Derek was part of our family. It was like a family chain. That missing link can never be replaced.
Okay.
Our family's just like that chain, broken, and it can never be repaired.
And at paragraph 107, you say we're coming up for 2024, but you won't be able to move on as you're stuck in 2020.
We're coming up into a new year shortly, 2024. I'll never be able to move into any new year, as I'm stuck in that year 2020. The year my life fell apart, when I lost my brother and my fiancé.
You say that the receptionist should never have been allowed to triage any patients.
Reception should never have been allowed to triage any patients, let alone a man who was presenting with a serious problem. She was allowed to play lottery with someone's life, and sadly that life was lost through her negligence. Craig did not get the winning ball. This can never happen again.
In the lessons to be learned section, these are points you've made so far very forcefully. At paragraph 111, you say that you feel angry and you want to know why some people were allowed to be with their loved ones at the end of life, yet others were not. There was no consistency. That's something about which you feel very strongly. Oh,
very angry. If somebody's in a COVID ward, if somebody's in a red ward, somebody's in the ITU, somebody's in any ward, and they've all got COVID, they've all got COVID. So what's the difference of somebody in an ITU, but people being allowed to visit somebody in a ward that's got COVID? They've still got COVID. So I don't know what the difference is what's the difference? If somebody's in a COVID ward, somebody's in ITU, they've still got the same COVID, but you're not allowed to visit anybody in an ITU, but people were allowed to visit people in a ward that had COVID. And I don't get that. I can't get my head around that. What the difference of that is. COVID's COVID, regardless where it is or what it is, there's still COVID. There's no consistency at all. Nothing.
You talk about listening to stories in your Bereaved group. I take it that's the Scottish COVID Bereaved?
Yes.
Yeah. And you say the stories are so different. And I think you're really making the same point about
exactly.
COVID is COVID.
There's people in my group that were allowed to be with their loved ones when they died with COVID in a ward, and they were also allowed to sit with them after it. in a ward, but we weren't even allowed to go in and say goodbye to somebody with COVID in an ITU. What's the difference? I don't get it. I don't get what the difference is.
Right. You have hopes for the inquiry, paragraph 114. Would you just read that out, please, so that we have it in your voice?
We want answers. My family and thousands of other families want the government to be held accountable for their incompetence, their ignorance and their disrespect to all those that died. They weren't just a number, but they were treated as a statistic. They were our life, they were our family, they were human beings, and they seemed to forget that. Their bodies were just discarded like toxic waste, the same as the flowers on my brother's coffin. We need to be prepared for more pandemics. We can't allow this to ever happen again. Our futures need to be made safe by this shambolic government.
Stewart, thank you very much for engaging with the inquiry and giving your evidence. We're very grateful to you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Stewart.
Thank you.
Very good. Now, Mr. Gill, what do you want to do about your second witness? You want 5 minutes to arrange it?
I think we have to have a few minutes to arrange the YouTube channel.
Yes, surely. When that's done, yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
Just while we're waiting for the witness, my lord, the reference is SCIWT0087, then 5 zeros 1.
Thank you.
And the witness is, her name is Pamela Thomas.
Now, Ms. Thomas, please come in, take a seat. Very good. Yes, Mr. Gill, when you're ready.
Thank you, my lord. Hello, Ms. Thomas. Your full name is Pamela Thomas? Your details, your date of birth, your contact details are known to us. I think you have given a statement to the inquiry, which we have and which we're going to be looking at. It will appear on the screen in front of you as we go through it. And you're agreeable that that statement, together with the evidence that you're about to give, will form part of the evidence informing this inquiry and will be recorded and published.
Yep.
Right. You're here to tell us about your brother James. And,
That's correct.
we know that James sadly died in Ninewells Hospital in Dundee on the 5th of October 2021,
That's correct.
and he was 41.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you tell us a little bit about him. In your statement, he was a chef and he worked all over Scotland.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think, given some of the information you've given, he obviously had quite a good business doing that.
Yeah, well, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. I think he also had another brother. Please don't name him, but there is another brother. Is that right?
Two brothers.
Two brothers. Did James have any children himself?
Two.
Two. Okay. Now, at paragraph 52 of your statement, it's not necessary to go to it, but at paragraph 52, you say that you and he had a special bond, that he was your best pal.
Yeah, that's right.
And you also say that he was kind, he was helpful.
Very. Heart of gold.
And that he was also like a dad to your older sons.
Yep.
Right. Now, perhaps something you may not have wanted to have to tell us about him, but paragraph 5, you say he had a bit of meat on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was 19 stone in weight, but he hadn't seen a doctor in about 20 years until he needed treatment for a peptic ulcer in 2019.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And you describe it as generally as a healthy individual.
Yep.
Okay. Now, in September 2021, you and your family, I think, contracted COVID.
Yeah.
And your husband also contracted it. I think one of your daughters contracted it.
It was my little girl. She brought it home from school.
Okay.
And we all ended up with it.
Yeah. And your brother contracted it as well.
Yeah.
Is it likely that he contracted it as a result of the family infection?
Possibly. There could have been another way that he got it, but we put it down to through the family, yeah.
And you do tell us that, well, we can disclose that your brother lived in St Andrews, as I understand it. And you say that his symptoms were different to yours.
That's correct.
Yeah. And he lived alone.
Yeah.
Is that right? And I think you were phoning him as obviously you and your husband, because you had COVID, couldn't go to see him.
That's right.
Is that right? And I think you got your son to go and see him. Is that right?
Yeah, so I would be, I was unwell myself, so I was sleeping quite a lot. And between sleeping and waking, I would phone my brother just to check on him and see how he was, and then he would be describing what kind of symptoms he had. And that's just kind of how it went for a few days at the time. Yeah. And then until, you know, he was started complaining that he'd had really bad diarrhoea, which was different from what any the rest of us had. So that's the point where I'd asked my son to take stuff through to him, which was like diuretics and stuff like that. I sent stuff from Amazon and stuff to his door, delivery, and yeah.
And I think your son did get to see him, and you tell us that from what your son had said, that your brother was disorientated.
So that was the second time my son went. Yeah. My son went through on 2 occasions. Right. On the second occasion, that was after the Amazon parcels weren't, the door wasn't getting answered, and I was getting messages on my phone. So I was trying to phone my brother and say to my brother, you know, why are you not answering the door to get the parcels? And it was parcels of stuff like vitamins and stuff like that. And I'd contacted my nephew, who also lived in St Andrews, and asked to go and check on his dad because I couldn't get him. And that's when he'd found his dad. He didn't answer the door, and he found the Amazon parcels at the front door, and he went into the house, and my brother was in a bit of a mess. He was disorientated and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. When you were contacting your brother by phone, did he sound normal?
Yeah. He was making a noise, like a clearing his throat kind of noise. I can remember that. And I can remember asking him, why are you making that noise? And he says to me, what noise? It was like he wasn't aware he was making the noise. He didn't complain of any like shortness of breath or anything like that. It was purely diarrhoea that he was complaining of.
I think you tell us, the reason I ask you that question, Ms. Thomas, is that you do tell us in paragraph 11 that your brother phoned you and he was making what you describe as a guttural sound.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It was like, it was just kept doing that throughout speaking. But the conversations were short, and it was, you know, they were just like, are you okay? Or, you know, I was unwell myself at the time, so it's a bit hard to remember, but they kind of things stick with me.
Now, help was given to your brother to get showered and dressed, and I think after trying to get in touch with NHS 24, your brother was taken to A&E at Ninewells.
Yeah, so that was the second time that my son went back. I had to phone him and say, will you go back? Will you go and check on Uncle James? I've had a phone call, obviously, to say that something's not right with him. Can you go through? And so my son went through, helped him in the shower, helped him get dressed and stuff like that. And then tried to phone NHS 24, couldn't get them, and he took him to Ninewells Hospital.
And when they got to Ninewells, what was the reaction there?
Well, my son went into A&E and explained that you know, there was family members with COVID, and that his uncle was in the car with his lips were blue and he needed help. And he was told by a nurse that she was dealing with a teenage boy with a broken leg, and that they wouldn't come out to help my brother or help my son. There was 5 ambulances outside, and my son was asking them for help. Nobody would help him. My brother had says to my son just to take him away again. He didn't want to cause a fuss or anything like that. But my son refused. He says, no, I'm going to get you help. In between this, he was on the phone to me, and we decided that, you know, he would phone 999 from outside the hospital, and that's what he done.
And I think as a consequence of doing that, a doctor did come out and your brother was taken into hospital.
Yeah, the call handler had said to my son not to move. He was absolutely fantastic. He says, stay where you are. I'm going to phone in. He says, and I'm going to get somebody to come and help you. And a doctor came out and came over to the car, and my son described it as he kneeled down, took my brother's pulse, looked at my brother, and decided that my brother had to go into hospital.
Yeah. Okay. I think you were noted as being your brother's next of kin for
That's
the
correct.
purposes of his admission into hospital.
That's correct.
Yeah. Your brother was tested for COVID and I think tested positive.
That's correct.
And you continued or were in contact with him by phone. And as you say at paragraph 14 of your statement, your brother was saying that he was good.
Yeah, so it was text messages, or should I say Facebook Messenger kind of messages that we were communicating by.
Were you able to FaceTime your brother at that point?
No, I didn't get a FaceTime with my brother for 6 days.
Okay.
But he did send me a picture of himself with a CPAP hood on.
And having seen that, were you satisfied that he was good, as he'd put it? Or did you have doubts as to whether or not he was well?
Well, I thought he was in the best place.
Yeah.
I thought he was just going to get a drip, and, you know, he was in there for, like, dehydration and everything would be okay.
Yeah. Now, at paragraph 15, you say that you now know, or you know now, that they were trying to put him on a ventilator.
That's correct.
How did you come by that knowledge?
Because I obtained my brother's medical records. And I read them, every page.
And what was your reaction to finding that out?
That my brother must have been scared. And I was angry.
Why were you angry?
Because the messages that I was getting from my brother, and obviously he didn't tell me how scared he was. And, you know, I don't know, I was angry. I was angry. I was angry because the things that I read in his notes wasn't what the doctors were saying to me on a daily basis. The doctors were lying to me on a daily basis. Nurses were lying to me on a daily basis. Everything that was in my brother's notes was different from what I was being told on a daily basis.
Okay. Well, let's just talk about how you were getting information.
Okay.
I think you mentioned to me a few moments ago that you were able to keep in touch with your brother.
It was only for the first couple of days. My brother went into hospital on the Friday night. By 10:30 on Friday night, we were told my brother was going to die. We were communicating via messages and stuff like that. Brother, you okay? And, you know, he was texting back, and I got a thumbs up in one of the picture messages that he sent me. You know, I was telling him that he had to eat and he was going to be okay and get some fluids and that into him. And so that was happening for the first couple of days. That happened over the course of the weekend. On the Saturday, I'd presented at the hospital to ask to see him and give toiletries and stuff into him, and I was told I wasn't allowed.
Right. Were you given a reason why you weren't allowed to see him?
No reason, COVID, but I'd already had COVID. I asked if I could sign any kind of document because I'd just had COVID myself, and I was prepared to take any risk as long as I could see him.
And you were trying to take certain things into the hospital for him?
So they let me take toiletries up to the foyer, 9 Wells, and a nurse came from ICU and took the toiletries and gave me his keys and stuff like that for his house, and she took the toiletries away, but we weren't allowed in to see him.
The Facebook messages
Yeah.
that you were exchanging with your brother, did he seem sensible in these messages, or did you have concern about how what his condition was?
They were kind of one-liners. They were one-liners. So he wasn't engaging in a lot of conversation. You know, I would be writing big things to him, and I would be getting one-liners back.
Was that unusual in the way you would normally communicate with each other?
Yeah.
Okay. Paragraph 20 of your, well, paragraph 19 and 20, you note that things went a little bit quiet, and you discovered from his records that your brother had been given lorazepam.
Yeah, so I think that was the night that he was ventilated. So he got ventilated early hours of the Monday morning, which was the 21st. He went into hospital on the 17th of September. He started to become, you know, that like he wasn't responding. I'm saying, brother, are you there? Are you there? Answer me. Just even a wee thumbs up. Just give me something. But I think it was by tea time on the Monday night. You know, I just wasn't getting any responses from him. So I'd phoned the hospital and I asked them. I says, have you given my brother anything? Because they told me that he was on a CPAP hood, but he may start to get tired. So then I asked him, and he told me that he was eating, and he was drinking, and he was good. And then I asked him, have you given my brother anything? Have you made my brother tired because he's not responding to me? So there was quite a discussion with one of the nurses. It got a bit heated, and I said I was going to phone my brother. Obviously, I wasn't going to phone him because I knew that he couldn't speak to me, but I was wanting her to get my brother to communicate with me and respond to me, and she got quite angry with me. I had explained to her that my brother had given me a photograph of his monitor, and he had asked me to get that checked out. Because I had a friend that worked she used to work in the Cornhill in Perth. So I thought maybe she would be able to look at it and tell me what this monitor meant and the readings and stuff on it.
What was your understanding at that time? You talked about the heated discussion that you had with the nurse. What was your understanding at that time as to whether or not your brother was on a ventilator?
No, he wasn't on a ventilator at that point.
No. You knew that?
Yeah.
What was your attitude towards your brother possibly being put on a ventilator, or indeed his attitude to that happening?
We didn't want that to happen.
Why not?
Because the chances of coming off one weren't good. That was quite evident. You were seeing that people were going on them and not coming off them.
You continued to keep in touch with your brother, and I think you say at paragraph 25 that he developed ventilator-associated pneumonia, or VAP.
Yeah, so
is that something you found out afterwards?
Yeah, so I had a friend whose husband had also been in hospital with COVID, and he was on maximum oxygen for 3 weeks. So what I couldn't understand is why the ventilator was being pushed on my brother. And I'm not a doctor, but I thought, why can you not just give my brother maximum oxygen for 3 weeks if that's what it takes? Why is there such a hurry to put him on a ventilator?
You tell us at paragraph 25 that you tried to mentally prepare yourself by looking at pictures on Google. What were you trying to prepare yourself for?
For what I was going to see, because that was after the 6 days when they allowed me to get it was a WhatsApp kind of FaceTime kind of thing. So I needed to know what I was going to be looking at and what my brother maybe looked like. So by looking at the pictures on Google of people on ventilators and what positions they were in, prone positions, stuff like that, I looked into all that kind of stuff and tried to familiarise myself with what I would be looking at. Sorry, with regards to the ventilator-associated pneumonia, nobody told me about that. I found that out later.
That was something you found out from his records?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we'll come to it in a little while, but there are a considerable number of infections that your brother had that you found out later. You were also told that the medical staff were going to do a BAL procedure, which I think is to obtain material from the lungs, a sample from the lungs.
So that was the weekend that things changed, the weekend just before my brother died. That procedure was carried out and that was done. We were never told the results of that. The results of that were deleted from his medical records. I asked if there was any, risks involved with that because the word collapse was there. I asked what that meant and I was never told.
Okay. Now, you did have a video call with him, but you noticed a change in his appearance.
So
I did that.
I video called him after the first 6 days. I video called him every night. I would phone in the morning. The doctors would then, or consultants would phone in the afternoon and give me a quick update. And between that time, I'd joined ventilator survivor groups on Facebook, and I was reading other people that were going through the same kind of thing. So then I was trying to ask the doctors, nurses these questions, which I was learning from this survivor group, people that were on ventilators. It was about the peak flow, tidal volume, amount of oxygen, all different kinds of stuff. I just read and read and read, and I asked question after question. I was told by the doctors that I shouldn't be, it was okay to read, but I should be asking them the questions and not taking anything from Facebook, from what other people were going through. And I video called him every single night, and then I called him every night. I called the hospital every night before I went to bed, so it was like 4 times a day I was on the phone. My son would come on with me to the video call, and my brother was obviously unconscious, heavily sedated. He was, I don't know if he could hear me or not, but my son would play music for me, for him, and songs just to try and hope that he could maybe hear us. And my son would talk to him about football scores and just tell him to keep fighting. I would sing to him and tell him that we loved him. And I'd done that every day until the weekend of the BAL procedure.
You mention at paragraph 27 that your father's partner, again, please don't name anybody, had a video call with James during the day, and that she had observed that he was looking a bit red.
Yes, that was the day the procedure was carried out.
Yeah. And also you had a video call that night, and you say he was looking swollen.
Yeah, and I asked the nurse about it, and the nurse told me that it was maybe just the lighting in the room or the way he was lying. But it was different from what I'd seen every other night. And
I think you say that was the day that they did the BAL procedure.
Yeah. We can work out the dates of these, so don't worry about that.
But you had a video call, were supposed to have a video call with him on the Sunday night, and you realized that something wasn't right as the staff at the hospital told you to phone back, as that they were really busy.
So what had happened was, after this procedure was done and we noticed a change in James, we spoke to the doctor, his consultant, and she suggested that she was going to start him on, well, I think I suggested, because I'd been reading these things off the survivor group about water retention medication, and she says she was going to start him on antibiotics. So when I tried to get the video call that night, this was the Sunday night, they said, I'd phoned quite a few times, and they said they were busy, and then they said, oh, they were going to give him his antibiotics, and then they were like putting me off and putting me off, putting me off. Eventually I had to tell my son, look, just go to your bed, you've got school in the morning, I'll sit up and I'll wait for this call, I'm not going to my bed until I get it. So it was about 5 to 12 at night that I got the call. I've got the WhatsApp screenshot, and I got that call, and my brother looked horrific.
Yeah. You tell us about that, and it's up to you whether you want to
I would like to tell you,
but it's at paragraph 28.
Yeah, so he was lying on his front, which they call prone position, and his face was to the side. And his face was like a balloon. It was red raw, like a balloon swollen. And I says, what's wrong with my brother? Why is his face like that? And this was at 5 to 12 at night. I says, look at the state of him. And then I wondered, has he took an allergic reaction to this antibiotics that he's just been started on? Because that was the first time of me being told James would be started on an antibiotics, and I thought, fantastic, you know, my brother's had like one course of antibiotics in 20 years, he'll really respond to it, this is great. I can't really remember what they said, but they never gave me much of an explanation for it. It was the next day that I got the call. Yeah,
you got a call the next day from a doctor, as I understand it, from paragraph 29.
Yeah, this was
when COVID lungs was mentioned.
Yeah, so this was a different doctor. This wasn't the same consultants who I'd been speaking to regularly. This was a different one who told me that James's face was nothing to be concerned about, that James, the only thing that was life-threatening for James was only COVID lungs. And she made reference to if James came out with a scar on his face or anything like that, then that would, if he made it with that, that would be good. But nothing to be concerned about. This is your call for the day, and it's only COVID lungs.
Yeah. Okay. You tell us, paragraph 30, that there was a problem with social media the next day, and that there was a blackout.
Yeah, the whole system was down everywhere. You couldn't use Facebook, WhatsApp, anything like that. There was a blackout. That was on the 4th.
You said you were trying to stay positive. Were you able to get in touch with anybody at the hospital at that time, just by phoning them?
Yeah, I could phone, but I couldn't get my video call.
Yeah. What were you told in those phone calls?
Just no change.
No change, okay. And you were then, as you say, at paragraph 31, you were told by 9:30 or 10 o'clock on that day, you were told that your brother was going to die.
No, that was actually the same night he went into hospital. It was the 17th of September.
Oh, right, that's the same night, is it?
Yeah, there's a wee mistake there. It was the 17th of September. He went into hospital, and they were telling us that same night that my brother was going to die.
Yeah. Okay. So you do tell us, just in relation to a DNR, they do not resuscitate. You don't know if he had a DNR notice, but the hospital did say that they did try to resuscitate him.
Yeah, there's boxes on medical records where it's ticked if it's a do not resuscitate or not. None of my brother's boxes were ticked.
Yeah. You go on to tell us about a call from a doctor, please don't name the doctor, at 10:47. You'd obviously had a particular note of that. And the doctor asked if you were alone and you knew what he was going to say.
He asked me, he says, hello, Pamela, Pamela, are you alone, Pamela? Are you sitting down, Pamela? Have you got someone with you, Pamela? And I knew what he was going to say.
Yeah. And what he did tell you was that James had a cardiac arrest.
That's correct.
Yeah. You were told subsequently that, around the same time, that you could go in and see James, but you were warned that it was
a bit
not
of a
going to be
mess.
something nice.
It was a bit of a mess was the words that he used. He told me I could come to the hospital and see James, but I'll warn you now, he's a bit of a mess.
Okay. And what was did you want to see him?
Of course I did.
Yeah. And did you?
Yes.
And do you feel able to tell us about that?
Yeah, so we went to the hospital. I got a lift through. I went with my son, went with my brother's ex-partner. We arrived at Nine Wells Hospital. We were left waiting, which felt like forever, in the foyer. We'd had a mask and that on. Eventually, a nurse came up and got us and took us downstairs. And I walked into the room, and my brother was lying on a table, a metal table, and his eyes were like tennis balls and his lips were like bananas. He was swollen, and it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like, it didn't feel real at all. It just didn't feel like it was my brother lying there.
And I think one of the infections that your brother had was MRSA, which had caused damage to his face.
Yeah, well, the hospital referred to it as a small ulcer on his lip, but I'd taken photographs of my brother, and it was far from a small ulcer.
Okay.
That was one of the infections. He also had a number of other ones: stenomatosis, haemophilus influenza, candidas, all different kind of things.
Yeah. You tell us about those. Paragraph 42 of your statement. It's not at this point necessary to go to it, but
All right.
we've got that material from you there. The death certificate in relation to your brother was released, which certified that cause of death was SARS-CoV. Is that right?
SARS-CoV-2 was the only thing on my brother's death certificate.
Right. Okay. And I think you make the point there was a very small discrepancy about the actual time of death as well.
Yeah, and that also brought into question whether or not my brother was resuscitated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you've asked for a considerable number of investigations into how your brother died.
Yeah, that's correct.
And can you just tell us about those investigations? What investigations have you asked for? What are you looking for?
Well, what had happened was my brother was put on a trial, and I found through his notes that the signature wasn't his. It was a study investigator, I believe, signature that had signed him up for this trial. Mm-hmm. Now, we've got a man that didn't go to doctors, didn't have any medications, he was allergic to penicillin. That's about all we knew. So these trial drugs and stuff, I had a query about why my brother was given these drugs. Could anything have happened to him by being given these drugs? Was it an allergic reaction that he had? That was about all I knew at the time of his passing, until I obviously obtained his medical records and then found out lots of other things. So by reading through the records and discrepancies of the time of death, and then all the infections that he had, and being lied to on a daily basis from the doctors, I tried to then get a private post-mortem. I was supported by my funeral directors to contact Health Improvement Scotland and an interested person, because I was his next of kin, and we'd done that application, but unfortunately because the doctor, the certifying doctor, had was a consultant anaesthetist, he'd reported the death to the prosecutor fiscal. It was on 11 o'clock the morning that my brother died, but he didn't call me back until the afternoon, and he'd reported that about concerns that I had. But I didn't know that a defibrillator wasn't used on my brother, so I didn't have these concerns at 11 o'clock that morning. So that report to me was made falsely. And that then stopped Health Improvement Scotland being able to get involved and help us with my brother's investigation into his death. So then I was advised by them that we could get a private post-mortem, and it would be about £1,500 in a 3-week delay. And I had to contact the Crown Office to get support to do that, which I did. And the Crown Office told me that Health Improvement Scotland were giving me the wrong information. And so I went back to Health Improvement Scotland, and they'd said that they would go and get clarification from the, I asked them to get clarification what the right information was. And just as recently as last week, I had a complaint upheld from Health Improvement Scotland that says that I should have been allowed to get a post-mortem from my brother, and that the information wasn't given to me, and that the Crown Office should have supported our family in getting that and paying for that, should we have wished to have done that. So they've upheld that complaint.
Just may seem a minor point, Ms. Stewart, but was that communicated, that upholding of the complaint, was that communicated to you in letter?
Yes, I've got that.
Could you make that available through your solicitors to
I already have made it available to the inquiry.
Okay. Thank you. What was the real, why were you wanting a private post-mortem?
Because I wanted to find out if anything else had caused my brother's death. Because initially I thought he'd taken some kind of reaction. This was before I found out about any infections that he had. I'd thought, did he take a reaction to that medication, the antibiotics that they started him on? So, I don't know, someone just told me in my gut something wasn't right.
You had communications with the Procurator Fiscal's offices.
Yeah, that's correct.
Again, please don't name any individual, but what happened with those discussions?
That was absolutely horrific. That was horrific. I was told that so there's a procedure that gets followed if a death's reported to the Prosecutor Fiscal, that no lines or anything like that on the person should be removed, and the Fiscal should do an investigation. Nobody contacted me to ask, prior to issuing a death certificate, if the concerns which were actually submitted to the Prosecutor Fiscal was in fact my concerns. It just got allowed to happen. It was just issued. I, off my own back, decided to phone the Prosecutor Fiscal and ask for help. And I was told eventually somebody, a lady, got back in touch with me and says to me that this was after the death certificate and was issued and my brother's body was allowed to be released. She says that, she'd just become aware of the situation and that she'd made some phone calls with pathologists and that we wouldn't be getting supported. But at that time, I don't know if the Prosecutor Fiscal had any information like what we had. Because I didn't at that time. I didn't know about all the infections he had. He'd also gained like over 4 stone in weight, which was fluid. And they told us it was only inflammation. The funeral directors was the ones that says to me, they says they used to have a thing called like a cremation form 4 or something. If they had an issue with the cause of death, which was on the death certificate, then they would get in touch with us people or whatever, or they'd tick a box. And I asked them directly, I says, if you still had the forms, if they still existed today, because they'd done away with them, they stopped doing them, I says, I said, would you have ticked that box to say that you've got a concern with the cause of death of my brother's death certificate? And he says to me, yes. So I pushed and I pushed and I pushed to try and have an investigation into my brother's death. And each time I was told, no, the door was shut on me. I was coming back to them with new information. I wanted to know do basic things. Do you know my brother had A, B, C, and D? Do you know this? Do you know that? And nobody will even answer me.
Are you still pushing for that?
I'm trying,
further investigation into your brother's
I'm trying,
death?
but they're closing doors on me. But I'll keep pushing.
Okay.
I won't stop.
Okay. I think we've noticed paragraph 42. You list, presumably from having read your brother's medical records, the various hospital-acquired infections that were disclosed.
Yeah, this is
one
a thing.
of the things, I'm sorry, just give me a moment. The one thing that you do make a note there is that you also found out that he'd been prescribed an immune suppression drug, which may have made him more susceptible to those infections. Is that right?
So that's the toximolobab. That he was given that, and what that does is suppresses your immune system. Now, he was already vulnerable and in a hospital. He didn't have these infections when he went in, and then he ended up with all of these. Now, with my brother living in England, living in Scotland, no going to a doctor, did they have access to, his kind of records and stuff like that? Anything that would have been, he couldn't get antibiotics that would have maybe given him a chance to fight these infections. He was allergic to them.
Okay. Right. Given the fact that you've been pressing and pressing for further investigation, how do you feel about the way in which you've been treated so far as trying to get that investigation?
I've just been absolutely silenced. Just as recently, again, as last week, my brother was referred for a thing called ECMO, and I was given a transcript, almost, a conversation between the doctors and Leicester. He was to be referred to Leicester because of the capacity issues at Aberdeen. And I asked, just in August, I went to another meeting with the hospital and I asked them, did my brother not go to Leicester for ECMO because of these hospital infections that he had? Because I thought to myself, maybe they couldn't transfer him because of these infections. Maybe it was too dangerous. And then just in November, they responded by telling me, but the issue was a clinical decision not to send him to Aberdeen and not a capacity issue. And there was some confusion there. But I've already got the whole transcript of all these discussions with them in communication with Leicester, stating clearly that it was a capacity issue with Aberdeen, and they were in discussions with the Leicester team. And he was a candidate, and he could have went there.
This is something you talk about in paragraph 37 of your statement. Again, I think you've told us it.
Sorry.
But no, please, it's not a criticism at all, Ms. Stewart, but you've told us that at paragraph 37, so we have that.
Yeah, I asked the hospital just last week do you want to, I gave them the opportunity to have relook at that statement alone. And then they have decided that they won't communicate with me any longer and that I should now just go to the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman for any answers.
Can we deal briefly with the impact that you say in your statement? There's a requirement that your family members had to sign a form to say that they were able to carry the weight of the coffin.
That's correct. My brother was 29 stone in his coffin. I contacted the funeral director and I asked the funeral director for the weight. And he was 29 stone, and then he deducted the weight of the coffin, so it left almost 4 stone of a difference. So my children and everyone that carried my brother's coffin therefore had to sign a document, you know, kind of at their own risk for the weight of him. They wanted to wheel him in one of those trolleys, but we said no, they wanted to carry him.
Okay. It's probably a slightly small point in the general scheme of things, but one of the things we are hearing about is some of the practical consequences after death of what crops up. One of the points you've made is that because your brother worked for himself as a chef, he had various bookings, and people have been looking to you for money that he was paid.
Yeah, that's correct. They started messaging me on Facebook, Messenger and stuff like that, and I just explained, I don't know what happened at the time. I can remember getting a phone call on my landline while he was on a ventilator, and it was something to do with like events bookings. I don't know if that was maybe at the time when my brother maybe started working for himself or something. I haven't got a clue, but they had my phone number anyway. Yeah. And the woman suggested that we go on Facebook and put a message up to say that my brother was in hospital. And in turn, because of that, people started messaging me. Obviously, at that point in time, you know, I was in a hope that my brother was going to be coming out of that hospital alive. Then some of the messages started getting cheeky and stuff like that. And then I thought, you know what?
Something you could have done without.
Absolutely.
The funeral, I don't think was restricted.
No.
In terms of numbers.
No. You make the point at paragraph 49 that your brother wasn't vaccinated. Yeah.
You also say that he wanted to wait and see. Can you just explain what he told you about getting vaccinated?
Yeah, so what had happened actually is my father-in-law, who sadly passed away now, he died suddenly in the January after my brother. He'd had the vaccination and he took a reaction to it, and a doctor came out and administered him with penicillin. He was in his bed at the time and they had to administer him, I think it was an injection of penicillin for this reaction that he'd taken. So we were a bit cautious. If this was a drug that you would have to get if you were taking any kind of reactions, then that's not something that we could have had because we're allergic to penicillin. So we decided, you know what, we'll just wait and see.
Okay. We'll just leave that. Right, just, I referred to paragraph 52 about your special bond with your brother at the very beginning of you giving evidence, Ms. Stewart. But perhaps in paragraph 53, you tell us really the effect that this has had on you. Perhaps you just read that, please.
Yep, I haven't slept a night since the 17th of September. I just keep going over and over in my head. Why did I not make him go to the doctors? Why did I not go through and take him to the hospital? The guilt's killing me. And what I mean by that is I left my son to take my brother to the hospital. I didn't go with him.
Yeah, but you were ill at the time.
I was ill at the time, but I left my son to go alone.
And one of the further effects on a wider family, you make the point that your son had a problem, ended up having to go to Nine Wells the following year, and he saw what he took to be the thing, as you put it, that they took Uncle James away in.
Yeah, that's right. So it was on the 21st of October 2022. My son ended up having to go to hospital. And I think that was the next time I ever stepped foot in that building. And I had to go in with him. Obviously, I was absolutely terrified, but I had to be there with my son. And we seen we'd went to get a drink and we ended up having to wander about the hospital because it was late at night, it was in the middle of the night maybe, and we ended up way down the bottom of the hospital, and it was like a bed, and it had like a grey tent thing on it, and my son told me that's the thing. It was like they got zipped inside it, and my son told me that's the thing that they took Uncle James away in.
I need to correct myself. It's Miss Thomas, not Miss Stewart. I do apologise.
That's okay.
We all make mistakes. So my apologies to you for that.
That's okay.
Thank you for reading that paragraph. I realise it was a bit of an ordeal for you, but thank you for
That's okay.
telling us about that. You tell us about the lessons that you feel should be learned. And again, would you mind reading that? I don't think it's quite the emotional part of your statement that the last paragraph was, but if you could read that, please.
Yeah, I feel like things have been made worse because of the way the NHS and the Fiscal's Office have dragged this out, inquiries, or should I say, no inquiries. Nobody should ever have to go through that. the NHS and the Crown Office should be more transparent in their dealings with the people who have had to endure such bereavement. When the Crown Office said there would be no further investigation into my brother James's death, they gave no explanation as to why they came to that decision. And that can't be right. And that's basically because, you know, I've asked questions, did they know about all the things in his records? Were they aware of that? They won't even give us information as to what the pathologist reports obtained. They won't tell us anything. I've put in subject access, freedom information, everything. It's shelved. Somebody else can read it. Our family can't.
Your hopes for the inquiry are set out in 57. Would you just read that, please?
Yeah, I want to know where COVID came from. Also want to know what the government are doing to make sure that this never happens again. Nobody should ever have to go through this again, what my family have endured.
Ms. Thomas, I'll get your name right this time. Thank you very much for your evidence and for engaging with the inquiry.
Thank you for giving me a voice today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's all. 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning?
10 o'clock, my lord, yes.